with Prehistoric Planet Ice Age releasing on the 26th of November of this year, it brought many paleontology enthusiasts yet another remarkably made piece of paleomedia to the small screens. Personally, I found it quite enjoyable, and I really liked an emphasis on other aspects of the Pleistocene epoch. With that being said, most of the show was pretty accurate in terms of informed reconstructions, as many of the species are known from mummies, cave art, and close relatives, so much of what we saw was, for the most part, correct. Like most paleomedia, there are some things that will simply be incorrect, so in this video, I'll dissect what this show got inaccurate and what should have been depicted in its place. As much as I'd like to review what this show got right, there's already several other videos that do a much better job at this than I could. So with that being said, here's the rundown. All of this includes spoilers, so watch at your own discretion. Here are the 5 inaccuracies that were present in Prehistoric Planet Season 3, also known as Prehistoric Planet Ice Age. One of the first animals we got a glimpse at when we first saw the promotional material for this show was Homotherium, better known as the Scimitar Cat. This particular genus of cat was very prevalent throughout the Quaternary, as it had a nearly global range, spanning all of Eurasia, most of Africa, and the Americas, with the only place they failed to reach was Australia. The genus had 3 variants within the show: a spotted pattern in episode 1, an arid plain pattern in episode 4, and a winter coat variant in the last episode. The species that were probably depicted were either H. latidens, which would be in episode 1 and 4, and H. serum, episode 5. Since the mummified remains of Homotherium belong to the Old World species H. latidens, then the episode 1 model, the spotted coat variant, is inaccurate because of what we see in the baby scimitar cat's remains. The researchers in the initial paper described the coloration as a, quote, dark brown fur that varied in volume and thickness, unlike what is seen here with the gray spotted coat inspired by snow leopards. What's also interesting was the environment in which the mummy cat was found. Analyzing fossil pollen, the researchers in this new paper revealed that the cub lived in a wooded environment with a mix of open grassland. The presence of water was also noted. Interestingly, the steppe lion also coexisted with the species in the region, so the authors hypothesized that they may have inhabited the wooded regions as a response to competition with the lions, despite the scimitar cats being more suited for open environments. In all fairness, the series was produced in late 2023, whereas the paper was published over a year later, in November of 2024. So most of the rendering had already been completed, making it far too late to revise their model. This inaccuracy has some leeway, in all honesty, as it wasn't the crew using wrong or baseless information, but rather our understanding of this species was rapidly changing. So I'll consider it the least inaccurate thing from this series. It is common hold for paleomedia and documentaries to name their animals by their Latin and/or scientific name. But in this series, many of the animals that aren't common staple of people's perception of the Ice Age, as listed here, were given really generic names or titles that didn't provide much sustenance in terms of information. Animals like Glyptotherium and Dodoceras were referred to as, quote, Ice Age armadillos, and Steller sea cow was referred to as, quote, an Ice Age giant, and just a sea cow. There were also 3 ground sloth species present: Megalonyx, Aromatherium, and Diablotherium. I also want to insert a note here. I actually thought that the Diablotherium was actually supposed to be Northotheriops. That's how unspecific it was. All of them were referred to as just ground sloths, instead of their specific name. If I lost any of you on what I meant, here's a quick montage.
Be a giant armadillo, an armadillo, strange type of rhino, a giant ground sloth, very sleepy sloths. This strange type of Ice Age kangaroo.
Additionally, there was no clear distinction between the geography in the show. Now one might wonder, why is this an issue? It's because a layman viewer might mistake all of the animals for living in the same geographical region when they didn't, This was especially problematic in the first episode when they transitioned from Ice Age Europe to North America. While the visual aspect of a paleo documentary is important, something that is even more important is the information being presented. As the previous seasons and the Walking With trilogy, as well as many other pieces of paleo media, did a better job at mentioning the more specific names than the generic ones. This is one of the more strange claims made in the show. While the awkward-looking anatomy of Thylacoleo carnifex might imply that it couldn't run fast, we have no literature or scientific works that demonstrate this. If the modern relatives of Thylacoleo are to go off of modern-day wombats, then the claim that Thylacoleo could only run 10 miles per hour is simply not supported, as wombats have been clocked in at around twice that in some individuals observed in the field. The channel Real Paleontology does an excellent job at going into depth on the specifics of these ancient marsupials, so I'd definitely check out his channel if you want more specifics. While the leg anatomy of this marsupial predator is not suited for long-distance hunts like Homotherium or other endurance-based hunters, it's still very much possible that this animal could have exceeded 10 miles per hour. Let's look at another marsupial, for example. The Thylacine, the only large predatory marsupial to make it to modern times, was clocked in at roughly around 24 miles per hour despite the awkward gait. Both wombats, koalas, and the thylacine are small or close in size to Thylacoleo, which was roughly around 5 feet or so. So the claim that it could only run around 10 miles per hour is a stretch at best, and in some ways is baseless at worst. When I first saw the teaser for this particular animal, I was wondering why they decided to give the pupil shape a slit look, despite no living varanid taking this appearance. In all fairness, Darren Naish, one of the main consultants of the show, mentioned in a tweet that this was done without his input, and it was far too late to revise it when he saw it. Still, the eyes are wrong, and this would make a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the pupil shapes in regards to reptiles. A common issue for many animals is being able to see in the dark, as low light conditions decrease the amount of light being reflected into the animal's vision. One adaptation that is used to counter this is slit pupils. Despite looking fierce, they serve practical application as they increase the amount of light bouncing back inside the retina via an unconstricted pupil. This is especially useful for nocturnal animals like geckos, cats, and other animals with slit eyes, as they often have to hunt in low-light conditions where it is not entirely clear. Megalania, as far as we know, is neither nocturnal, nor does it have close relatives that bear such an adaptation, as the animal is depicted hunting in broad daylight. So this is still, for the most part at least, inaccurate, because it goes against what we know about these animals' adaptations. I'm guessing this happened because the designers wanted to make an animal that was a bit more intimidating, but honestly, it's just guesswork at this point. Besides the pupil shape, the rest of the model looks very good and is what we think Megalania looked like in life. Now, let's address the sea cow in the room. This is probably the biggest inaccuracy in the entire series, as it isn't a matter of fact or whether or not it was speculation. This is indefensibly and factually incorrect because it contradicts what historical naturalists noted back when the species was still around. Context: look at the following clip. We can clearly see the Sirenian go under the camera in this shot. One might ask, why is this an issue? To that I say, it's because we know that these animals were positively buoyant, which literally means they couldn't fully submerge or even control their buoyancy. And this was one of the few things noted by historical naturalists when they first discovered this species. Bear in mind, these scientists weren't some schmucks or enthusiasts looking at animals in their natural habitat. They were trained in their profession, as they had access to large amounts of information. So when they saw that these animals were positively buoyant, they really did observe that. There were several reasons as to why this animal was incapable of diving or fully submerging itself, but one reason is its size, as this animal was the largest sirenian to make it into modern times, rivaling the size of small whales. These animals were also noted by naturalists for having thick blubber, as it was often described as being around 4 inches thick or so. While it may not be as thick as whales in similar latitudes, the inclusion of 1-inch thick skin would have made submerging completely challenging at best. Additionally, there may actually have been advantages to not being able to submerge entirely, as it would have reduced the area accessible to parasites, reducing drag while swimming, and it may have even helped in heat retention, as it would have increased the area via water conduction. The fact that the animal was feeding in shallow kelp beds meant that the animal may not even needed to have fully submerged because it wasn't in open water, and thus it wasn't an adaptation that would be particularly useful in this context. While many of the accounts contradict each other, one thing that they have in common is the description of rugose skin to the side and more smooth skin to the back, which implies that the back of the animal was, for the most part, exposed to the elements. As stated before, this animal was slow-moving, so the depiction shown here where it is diving under the camera isn't supported by evidence or the naturalist accounts. Hence why I consider this to be Prehistoric Planet Ice Age's biggest fumble, as it goes against the animal's biology and what was noted by naturalists when they were still around. Ignoring this discrepancy, this is actually probably one of the best depictions of Steller sea cow that has ever been produced, and probably the best so far in paleomedia, so I will give credit where it's due. Overall, I actually enjoyed this season quite a lot, and in terms of visuals, this season was in many ways superior to the previous ones in terms of realism. That being said, all paleomedia will eventually become outdated, but when they do, they tend to create interesting discussions about the life appearances of these animals, and they allow us to dive into the science behind the choices made in these shows. Thank you for listening. Take care.